And welcome to another Illini Now Sports Illustrated video. I'm pleased to introduce for the first time on our network, Brad Sturdy, the recruiting and basketball analyst for orangeandbluenews.com, the Rivals affiliate for Illinois. Brad, appreciate you doing this. It's the first time we've been able to chat one-on-one since, March. I'm hoping everything is okay and everybody's staying healthy. And I know you've got some athletes not only in your family but in your other job. You guys are getting ready. You guys are getting ready to reopen and start to get active again, right?
Yeah, we're starting to do some things. Have a few practices and scrimmage. Like not really can't scrimmage till next week, but hopefully we can get that going next week. But yeah, my daughter's been going over to college and getting some work in there. So we're starting out slowly but surely getting back to some actual sports, which is obviously fun. So we missed it for sure. It's been 3 months of not much.
So. Hey, Brad, all of us in the state of Illinois can't wait to get to Friday for Stage 4. I know that for a fact. In more ways than one,
Exactly.
Well, the reason I wanted to have you on is we sit right next to each other during Illinois games, and I end up tapping you on the shoulder a whole bunch, asking you about future kids and future recruits. I can't tap you on the shoulder right now because of social distancing, but we can do this. And I wanted to get your impression. First of all, let's start with the most recent. Let's start with 2021 class, where Illinois has a verbal commitment in Luke Goody, who, by the way, I just put on yesterday on Illini Now Sports Illustrated that he was able to do some AAU work in Fort Wayne for the first time.
Yes.
and looked good. So they've got one commitment. So in your impression, who is Illinois in a good position with to possibly join Goody in that 2021 class?
They've got such a long list of kids that they've been recruiting. I mean, if you kind of go through their list, look at kids like there's some kids that I really like. There's Brandon Weston, who was a teammate with Adam Miller in Io. You've got kids like Mac Etienne, the center who visited, right before the pandemic hit.
Sure.
They're in really good shape with those guys. They've also done a really good job with some kids that maybe we didn't, back in, January, February, maybe we didn't know they were options or they were in as good a shape with. Maybe Michael Foster, the kid who's out in Phoenix, and Alex Chico, who is, a high level 6'11" player, kind of player who probably usually ends up at Kentucky or Duke, but both those guys would follow that. But a couple kids I really like that maybe aren't as highly rated would be like a Jordan Nesbit, who's a top 100 kid from St. Louis. Very high on him. I just think he has, he may not be the greatest athlete. He's a very good athlete, but he has skills. He handles the ball well. He goes, he can go both ways when he's scoring. He can score from all three levels. I mean, just really impressive kid, and he's 6'6", can play a little point when need be. And then you've got David Jones as another kid. Davy Jones, who is out in West Virginia, there's another kid who's I think is really high on their list, and he's a kid they have a great shot at. So there's a long list of kids, and I think they're in a position of strength that maybe they haven't been in past years, because getting a commitment from a kid like Luke Goody is obviously a big deal. And when you're able to lock up a kid like him, who is he's an excellent shooter, which we saw last year. They didn't make many shots from the perimeter, but you had a kid like Goody who can shoot it. And then you also have a kid who's tough. I mean, he's a football player. He's a tough kid. He's not afraid to be physical. He's not afraid to battle, and he also has great feel for the game. I watched some game film this weekend, and I was really impressed with his feel for the game, because you see a lot of things in highlights, but it's obviously different when you actually get to see a kid, play live in game situation. I was pretty impressed with him this weekend.
I want to go back to Nesbit a little bit, only because I know that's a kid you like, and the obvious question is that if the COVID-19 pandemic had not happened, EYBL doesn't get canceled, AAU doesn't get canceled. Is that a kid that might have blown up a little bit more than what we're seeing right now, with more eyes being able to be on him in the summer than have been?
Yeah, I think so. He was going to play with the St. Louis Eagles, and they're, so obviously you get a ton of exposure there on the EYBL circuit, and I think he would have done extremely well. I mean, you 6'6" kids who can do what he can do with the ball, and also are blessed with athleticism are pretty impressive. So I think he was a kid that would have had spring and summer would have been great for. I think he would have been, really. He boosted his stock a little bit just with film going out. So I can't imagine what would have happened, had he actually gotten to play in front of people. And I think he would have done well just because I don't see a lot of weaknesses in his game. He's a very well-rounded, kid who can do a lot of things.
Let me also backtrack to Brandon Weston. Now that we know he's not going to reclassify, even though his mom told us for months that he wasn't gonna, I don't know if we ever believed her. But now we know he's not gonna. What do you like from the kid, or is Illinois in a good position to go 3 for 3 on Morgan Park kids with Io, Adam, and Brandon?
Yeah, I think they are. I think they're in a good position with him. I think it's going to depend on what maybe other kids do, because I don't know that they can take more than a couple, 3 guys. They've already got Goody, and let's say they get a Nesbit, then do they take a Weston? I mean, maybe they do. I know that his ability to play, although he's 6'5", he has the ability to play inside and out. He can be a 4-3, 3-4 type guy. And so because of his strength, athleticism, and ability to rebound and, run the floor, I mean, almost in a mold like a Roger Powell was on the, going back to 2005, where you've got a guy who's maybe a bit undersized to be a power forward, but yet he's also a guy who can spread the floor, but he can battle physically inside. And I think Weston's going to end up being that type of guy. And I think he's a 4-year guy. Who, those are kind of your the baseline of your program. You bring in a kid like, Io and Kofi, you don't expect them to be around for 4 years. Maybe Adam Miller, maybe you don't expect 4 years, but this is a kid who's probably going to be there 4 years and can really make an impact early on and then become, more of a high-level player, down the road. His junior, senior year, I think he'd be a really, really good player. So I think they're in good shape with him. Obviously, a great relationship. He and Adam Miller work tight, and Miller's been working on him. So I think they're in a good position there. So I think it's just a matter of waiting to see, waiting to see what happens. It'll be interesting to see also if they actually do have some events where they've talked about having events in August and September. I think some kids are kind of waiting to see what happens with that. But of course, with kind of some situational things with states closing, opening, and deciding they don't want to have spectators. And, in Illinois, for example, the 50 people limit obviously puts a damper on hosting anything. With the outdoor events, I guess you can have 20%, but indoor events, I think it's really hard for them to host it and have spectators and have coaches all in there. And so I think we'll see what happens with that before a lot of these kids make their decisions.
It's interesting you bring that up, Brad, because I kind of wondered with that 20% if the Vega Youth coaches were going to get creative and maybe throw an outdoor event, like Illinois' version of Rucker Park or something.
Yeah.
Figure out something like that so they could have more fans and maybe host something. But you're definitely talking about. Go ahead. You're definitely talking about something that Luke Goody was at and that you were able to go to in Fort Wayne last weekend, right? With these events.
Yeah. And so the one thing that is still going on is even though, Luke Goody, even though it was in Fort Wayne and it's closed basically, you've got, they're all videoed now, whether it's on like a Baller TV or something like that. So you can watch film. And so these coaches are still, they get in and they watch these guys play. So I think it's been just the fact they're having games, I think, has increased some interest. I think one of the 2022 kids we're probably going to talk about here in a minute just got an offer from Michigan State. So, I mean, you see kids that maybe haven't gotten to showcase themselves this spring. You're going to see them just through video get a few more offers as we go forward.
I feel like I'm putting you on the spot because we didn't talk about it in the pre-interview, but that's kind of how my brain works, Brad. I apologize. But before we hit 2022, I wrote something early Wednesday morning about I didn't know I was going to be asking you possibly about a 2020 kid this late. But do you know anything about Brandon Lieb over at Deerfield, the 7-footer that Illinois just offered?
Yeah, he's a kid who was originally thought to be in the class of 2021, reclassed to 2020. He's 6'10", 6'11". I think some places even list him as 7 foot, but he's definitely a big kid. He's got really good hands. He's does a good job in the post. So, I mean, he needs to get stronger. I think he's a kid that probably would be a long-term kind of guy. But he's very skilled. I mean, he can also shoot a 15, 20-footer. He has the ability to, he runs the floor okay for a guy's size. I just really think he's a kid that you put him in with an Adam Fletcher and get him working. I think he's got a lot of potential down the road. And I don't know that they wouldn't need him to come in this year, but if your choice is to get him to come in this year and then put, a year of weight on him, I think you're looking at a kid who could be pretty good, by, again, his sophomore, junior year, third or fourth year on campus. And he's going to be a chance to be pretty good. And they're going to need to replace, obviously, Kofi and Georgie moving forward, who are the fives. And they want to get a 2021 kid who's an impact guy, whether it's Etienne or Frank Kempdang or Charles Bidiakos, one of those guys. We want to get one of those guys, but at the same time, they also don't want to, put all their eggs in that one basket, and they have an open scholarship. So that's the kind of guy you roll the dice on and take a chance with.
It's two things hit me really with this Brandon Lee real quick. One is that it reminds me a lot of the recruitment of Jermaine Hamlin in the sense of long-term deal, take a kid late. What do you got to lose? He'll work with Fletch and maybe get better and help you out maybe as an upperclassman. No?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think you're right. The one difference is probably Hamlin's more of a defensive player, and I think Lee's probably more of an offense player. But they're a little bit different, but the dynamics are the same. It's like, hey, let's take a chance on this kid who was going to, in the case of Hamlin, he was planning on going to prep school. They take him before he goes to prep school, and Lee, he reclassifies in there. And I guess we don't want to put the cart before the horse, but Illinois looks in good position. As I understand it, I think Underwood's having a Zoom meeting with him tonight. And so we could get some movement there. Who knows? So I think I don't think they'd offered him if they didn't think they had a good chance at getting him.
And then, Brad, you and I both know that Illinois fans are going to see 7 feet, 200 pounds, and think Nick Smith. That's all there is to it.
That is maybe Mike Tisdale. Who knows? But
sure.
The one thing about this kid, I think he's probably in those. He's like that. He's more of a back to basket guy than either Tisdale or Nick Smith were. I mean, he likes playing inside, and he's got good post moves going right or left. So I think he's a little bit different, but because he's willing to be a 5. I think Nick Smith always he was a 3 trapped in a 5's body, So
sure.
And so that's probably the difference in the guys. And so he always liked this. I remember one of the old Illinois coaches said, does he like playing? Does he like to be a big? It's like when they're recruiting a kid,
right.
Does he like to? And I think in this case he does. So that's why it may be a better fit.
Good deal. Let's get to the 2022 kids. I believe the 16th was the first day. That Monday was the first day that they could start sending out, massive amounts of offers and really start to hit that class heavy. I think Illinois has sent out almost about 20 by now. I'm not asking you to go through them. I'm not asking you to go through them all, but of the early offers that Illinois has sent out, who do you like, and who do you think's a good fit?
Well, they're probably the 2 kids that I like the best are in-state kids, ironically, because they've offered a ton of out-of-state kids. But my 2 favorite kids that they've offered are obviously the top player in the state in 2022 is A.J. Casey.
Okay.
And he's a 6'8" kid who is a 3-4, just a dynamic wing. Dynamic player, I think he's going to end up as a top, 25 kid, at least top 50, maybe top 25 kid before it's all said and done. And then the other kid is
Casey's a Simeon kid, right, Brad?
He was at last year. He was at where Tinley Park.
Okay.
Tinley Park.
Okay.
Yeah, Tinley Park. And then the other kid that I really like is Jaden Shutt. From Yorkville. I think it's Yorkville Christian, small school. But he's a 6'5" kid, and he's a kid who also we have him ranked, I think, 146th in the nation, right? With Rivals. Sure. And I'm not begrudging that because people haven't seen him play at Yorkville Christian, but that is a kid who is probably going to end up being a top 75, top 50 kid because he's a great shooter. He has bounce. He's 6'5". He can just do a lot of things. He's really impressed. His highlight video this year may have been one of the best that I've seen. As far as it's just kind of a wow highlight video.
Yeah.
And his ability to shoot the ball is quick release, reminds you of a kid maybe and he's bouncy, but I mean, it reminds me of shoots it like a maybe. And I've heard some of his coaches say, like a JJ Redick type shooter. I mean, that's pretty high praise because JJ Redick's a great shooter. And I'm not saying that he's maybe that level, but he's a really good shooter, just a tremendous shooter. And I'm very high on him. I think he's a kid that would be great fit, especially the way Underwood likes to spread the floor around a big guy, whether it was Kofi or, was Georgie last year or Kofi the past year, and then maybe Kofi this year and Georgie, and then maybe it's Mac Etienne or Brandon Lee, whatever it is. So I think you get shooters around that. It can be really effective. And so Shutt is a guy who I would really hope Illinois, has an opportunity with, because he's going to be fun. He would be fun for us to watch courtside there. So those are the first two guys. I think another in-state kid they offered was a point guard, Trey Pettigrew.
There you go. I was going to ask about him.
Yeah, I think he's a very good player. I think there are a few guys that I'm actually surprised that haven't gotten more high major offers. And, Cam Kraft is another kid that Illinois hasn't offered yet, but some have. They're kind of this 2022, they're point guards, and they're kids that I really like. I think they're going to be good players. Now, I think some schools are saying, what class do I need a point guard? Do I want to have 3 or 4? I mean, and, I want more size. I think so. That's Illinois, but I think they're looking at 2022 at getting point guard. And I think Pettigrew has probably been their top in-state guy right now. And I thought he had a good fall. And so I think, that's something that, will be, I think he's a kid that they're going to be in until the end with. So, and they're very high on him. So he's a guy they offered. They also threw a lot of out-of-state offers too. I mean, on that first day, we wrote an article but I'll talk about another in-state kid, because Illinois was the first high major to offer him. Actually, I think they may have been the actual first offer for Kyle Thomas.
I like Kyle. I do. Brad, I'm 35, but I remember his dad. So yeah.
Yeah, Daryl Thomas and Kyle's a kid who's 6'10", and he's athletic. He's a very bouncy kid. Again, from attending St. Joe, and obviously the Ware's father was a star, and then he went to Indiana. And I think Illinois wanted to be the first to offer him, because in that class, I mean, he's just got so much upside. He's still raw. He's still figuring everything out, but I really like that offer. I think it shows that they're this is one of those things when we talk about in-state kids. Football struggle with in-state. I think with basketball, they want to be – they're not going to just settle for in-state kids. Like, if an in-state kid isn't interested, that's fine. We'll go get somebody else. But they also want to get the best players in the state too, whether it's Adam Miller, I would assume. So those are examples. But I think that they're trying to show in this 2022 class, we want to be the first to offer these guys, first time major or first school to offer these guys. And it shows how much we want to, we want to be involved in our own state. And I think this was a great offer. I don't know how close he is to deciding. I don't even know if he's, it could be a long way off, but I think it really put them in a good place with him.
Hey, Gene Pignator is not at St. Joe's anymore, so Illinois got a shot, Brad.
Yeah, they get a shot now, don't they? Yeah.
Let me ask you about that, Brad, since you brought it up. Is that it really does seem like Brad and Chen Coleman specifically, maybe a little bit of Stephen Gentry as well, really kind of want to get at least closer back to the Lou Henson, Jimmy Collins era, where if a kid was really good out of the state of Illinois, he would have Illinois on his list at the very, very least, and if not, go out and get him. I think Illinois fans are being drawn to Brad a lot more because he has that impression of how he wants to recruit and how he wants to recruit inside out instead of outside in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think the one thing that they have done, and I would include Antigua in that, because he's built a really good relationship, but kind of rebuilt the relationship like at Simeon, for example, and schools like that. So they've done a really good job with that. But I think the one thing that they've done that impressed me is they want the in-state kids. But they also, I'll give you an example of a kid that maybe Max Christie. They want Max. They would love to get Max Christie. But Max Christie really hasn't shown the same interest in Illinois that maybe they've shown him. And so he's so they're not going to just sit around and wait for Max Christie. Even though he's a great player, he's a 5-star kid, we're going to go get a Jordan Nesbit. We're going to go get a Davy Jones. We're going to go get Brandon West. We're going to go get somebody else. And so that's the one thing I've really been impressed with is their ability to find guys. I mean, we looked at a couple years ago that we needed a guard, and, they really were going after a kid like Courtney Ramey, and they end up with – they find this kid, JUCO kid that we, a lot of people had never heard of, and was, Andres Feliz, and he turned out pretty good. So they have an eye for talent. They couldn't get a guy, and they end up with Georgie. Georgie turns out to be a pretty good basketball player. So they're not stuck with just in-state. You want to recruit in-state, but you also don't want to just recruit in-state. And so they're giving the in-state kids their chance, and then if they don't pull the trigger, then it's like, hey, I'm going to go find some guys nationally. And they've, obviously they have some great connections, whether it's Antigua on the East Coast and, down south, and then Chin and has some out in Arizona and California and things. So they've, and Gentry with his Texas roots as well, talking, being already recruiting down there and been down there in Texas area. And he's, he was the lead recruiter on Luke Goody too. So they've done a really good job of expanding and being national in addition to being strong in state.
Last question before I let you go, Brad, is, again, I'm only 35, Brad, but I remember, the Illinois State basketball tournament being in Champaign. It has now come back. I think Brad is being genuine with his excitement and his overall enthusiasm, even if it never comes to pass that it doesn't directly help Illinois recruiting, but I think it could. You and I are both old enough to remember when it was at the Assembly Hall,
right?
And it did help. I was able to get Dion on the phone, Dion Thomas, and say that it helped him feel comfortable at Assembly Hall. Just your overall thoughts on how much you think that can help, and how much you think that moving forward can be something that Brad can really use on the recruiting trail, especially if he's starting to focus on some of these in-state kids that might end up there in a few years at the state finals.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll date myself a little bit. I remember watching, years. I remember watching, you can go back to, whether it's Marcus Liberty, playing in state tournament and in Champaign. It was great to see that, and then, I've attended Champaign, I've attended in Peoria, and I thought actually Peoria was really good at the beginning. It's kind of gotten stale. And I think that for the IHSA it was good. They need this kind of spark. I think they'll get better crowds at Illinois right now. And I think for Illinois, it's great because you're the flagship university for the state, right? And you want people to see. You have a new arena, and I guess not new, but a refurbished arena.
Sure.
That is a fantastic viewing place. I'm not sure what they're going to do with those corporate boxes, but I think they can really put those to good use. I think people really are excited to go see games there. I think kids are excited to play there. I know even when we had, they used to have this is just a few years back.
Like the shootout events you're talking about over in Champaign?
They have them at Assembly Hall. And that was before and the kids were so excited to play in a venue with 1,500 people in the Assembly Hall. It's Assembly Hall, and now it's the State Farm Center. But I think the feeling is the same. I think they're going to be excited. It's going to be a great atmosphere. And some people said, it seats 15,000. There won't be that many people. You're right. But I think they can put a lot of people in that lower bowl.
Right.
And then you start building up, I think it'll feel more crowded than it is because people are kind of close to the court on that lower level. And so I think it'll be good. I'm real excited for Illinois, to have that. For me personally, obviously covering it makes it nice. And I think for Illinois coaches, for them recruiting, they're going to be right there. They're just basically these kids are coming in on a visit, and maybe it's not even the kid that's a senior. Maybe it's a freshman from one of these schools that you get them in there and they fall in love, and they've been there. They've been on your campus. They've seen what you have to offer. They've seen a great venue, the cool locker rooms, the video room before you go out on the court when they're breaking down film pregame. It's really cool. So, I think it's great for Illinois. I think Underwood is genuinely excited. I don't think it's fake. I think he really wanted it back at the State Farm Center and wanted it in Champaign, and he got it. So I think they're definitely a tool they're going to use.
Hey, Brad, I appreciate the time. I promise you will not be a stranger on this network. And if you guys ever need anything from me over at orangeandbluenews.com, don't be afraid to ask, but I appreciate it. And I look forward to having you on again. Thanks for taking the time.
No, hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Thanks.
And we'll keep in touch.